scholars and caregivers and everyone watching today. Today is June 17th, 2020, and Mrs. Gus and I are here to talk about Hamlet with you.
The pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic on which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Who was Shakespeare? So let's take a look at some review so that you are ready to go for this week's segment.
So who was William Shakespeare again? Well known, the Bard was an English author of famous plays about a lot of different things, and he lived during the Elizabethan era. But why is Shakespeare considered such a great artist? Born in England in 1564, he started his career as an actor and playwright as a member of the actors group the Lord Chamberlain's Company, which would later become the King's Company. They played in several theatres until they eventually built the famous Globe Theatre, their very first own stage. As there were only male members in the company, every role had to be played by men. But that wasn't the reason why Shakespeare's plays like Othello or Hamlet were very popular. To match the various tastes of a diverse audience, Shakespeare created texts of high complexity, containing relatively simple plots as well as subtle nuances. Being the key to his success, his stories also contained multiple interlocking plots, twists and confusions, containing something for everyone in the audience. So it wasn't just the common people who enjoyed his works, his company even played at the King's Court for the amusement of the aristocracy. Besides the plays, Shakespeare also wrote a multitude of sonnets and poems. At first, his work consisted almost exclusively of histories and comedies, like A Midsummer Night's Dream and Henry VI. Later, tragedies like Hamlet also became part of his portfolio. In his work, Shakespeare used his own special language, rich in metaphors and vivid images. He even created new words which became firmly established. As a consequence, many English words used today, like lonely and gossip, make their first appearance in one of his plays or sonnets. Shakespeare died in 1616 at the age of 52. But his plays are still performed today and amaze audiences. Shakespeare's stories have found their way into many of today's movies, books, and even music. And fortunately, nowadays, women can also play Juliet.
The introduction to Hamlet, like many of Shakespeare's plays, is an immediate immersion into action, with sentinels on guard at Elsinore, fearful that they will see a ghost that has appeared before. When Horatio joins them, they discuss their belief that it is the ghost of the dead king, whose brother has recently married his widow. The first scene of Hamlet begins with the appearance of the ghost of the late King Hamlet. In the rising action, Prince Hamlet's friends tell him about the appearance, and he goes with them to see the ghost. The ghost tells him that his uncle Claudius murdered him and that Hamlet must avenge him. In the meantime, we learn that Fortinbras seeks to avenge the death of his father, who had died in battle against King Hamlet some years before. After holding court, Claudius tells Hamlet he is mourning too much. Later, Ophelia tells Polonius of a distressing encounter with Prince Hamlet. Polonius thinks Hamlet's love for Ophelia is driving him mad and decides that he must tell the king and queen of this occurrence. They scheme a chance meeting between the two. When Hamlet and Ophelia meet, Hamlet tells her that he never loved her, leaving her distraught. Claudius and Gertrude decide they need to send Hamlet to England. Hamlet then sets up a play depicting Claudius murdering his father. While watching Hamlet's play, Claudius falls into a mad frenzy. On his way to speak with his mother after the play, Hamlet finds Claudius and nearly kills him. He hesitates because he thinks Claudius is praying. During the climax, he goes to speak with his mother, and during their argument, kills Polonius, who was spying on them from behind a tapestry. Claudius, now paranoid, sends Hamlet to England with a death warrant. In the meantime, it is discovered that Ophelia has committed suicide. After being captured by pirates, Hamlet plots his way back to Denmark and has Horatio meet him there. When they get back, they witness Ophelia's funeral and Hamlet and Laertes scuffle. During the falling action, Claudius and Laertes decide to plot Hamlet's murder at a fencing match, poisoning the sword and the wine.
Okay, so make way. If you remember, this is the scene where the rest of the court clears out as Hamlet approaches. Polonius, who is, yes, Ophelia's father, tries to get Hamlet to commit himself to tell the truth about the fact that he's in love with Ophelia. But Hamlet weaves a web of half-mad words that confounds the old man, that confuses Polonius. Why might Hamlet shield his love for Ophelia at this time? So that would be an essential question. That's what we want you to think about right now as we continue interpreting Hamlet. Okay, so as I read this next slide, I want you to think about, what does the word pump mean as it's used in this context? Forgive me if I do not say these two characters' names correctly. When Rosencrantz and Guildenstern try to pump Hamlet for information, the result is much the same. Hamlet finds out they're working for Claudius and warns them that they are playing a very dangerous game. So what would you think the word pump means? Okay, so here's a tricky situation. It's called the mousetrap. And I don't know if you've ever played a game that has a mousetrap or maybe constructed something like a mousetrap. But the mousetrap is used differently when you're dealing with narratives or when you're dealing with writing. So Shakespeare was a genius when he decided to use this strategy in his writing. Hamlet is diverted by the arrival of traveling players. So these were players that would travel from town to town and put on plays for people. Because remember, they didn't have cell phones and TV and the internet. So he begins a speech he liked, and the player's leader finishes it for him. So they make a connection, speaking so passionately that he changes color and starts to cry. Hamlet engages the group to play the mousetrap, which is a play, before the court, before the king and queen, the next night.
If she should break it now.
Both here and hence, pursue me lasting strife. If once a widow ever, I be wife.
Madam, how like you this play?
The lady doth protest too much, methinks.
Oh, but she'll keep her word.
Have you heard the argument? Is there no offense in it?
No, they do but jest. Poison in jest. No offense to the world.
What do you call the play?
The mousetrap. 'Tis a knavish piece of work. But what of that? Your Majesty and I have free souls. It touches us not.
Okay, so following the play, Hamlet is reflecting on the whole night, and he berates himself. So we want you to think about what berates means. He's very torn right now. He's kind of beating himself up. If the players in the play can work up that much emotion about a literary character, Hamlet is asking himself, why can't he avenge his father's murder? So the play that is going on, or just went on, is going to test Claudius, and if he reacts, then he's guilty. The play is similar to the murder. If King Claudius doesn't react, then the ghost, in Hamlet's eyes, is just an evil spirit, and it's not really his dad's ghost. So let's watch more of the clip from Hamlet, and you decide on King Claudius's guilt or innocence.
Hamlet reveals Claudius through the traveling actors. Now remember, last week we explained how all the actors were males. Do you remember why?
So in this clip, as you see the reveal, you are going to see that all the traveling actors are males, which sometimes in middle school we think is kind of funny or silly. But then we always refer back to how we are, learning and growing and becoming mature young adults. So we have a tendency to learn to appreciate that 400 years ago, there were rules.
You shall see anon how the murderer gets the love of Gonzaga's wife.
How fares my lord?
Give me some light! Light! Give on the flame! What? Frightened with false fire? Why, let the stricken deer go weep! Why, let the stricken deer go weep? Thou art ungodly play, for some must watch while some must sleep. Now runs the world away!
Oh, good Horatio. I take the ghost word for £1,000. Didst perceive?
Very well, my lord.
Upon the talk of the poisoning?
I did very well.
Believe none of us. We are errant knaves, all. To a nunnery go, and quickly, too.
So remember Polonius's plan for Ophelia. He plants her in the hall to meet Hamlet while he and Claudius eavesdrop from behind tapestries. Hamlet realizes this is a setup. He tells Ophelia to get to a nunnery. Okay, this is foreshadowing to get to a safe place before the court corrupts her and threatens Claudius.
And if you're wondering what a tapestry is, that's what you're going to see right here in the background, a tapestry. Okay, so King Claudius is guilty and plans revenge on Hamlet. He's angered because of his guilt. At Hamlet's implied threat, the king decides to send Hamlet away to England. Polonius suggests that Gertrude, remember Hamlet's mom, might be able to reach where Ophelia failed. Hamlet is delighted at how his plan has worked because he knows that Claudius is guilty and that the ghost is really his dad. So again, he warns Rosencrantz and Guildenstern that they can't manipulate him. Although he sees through Polonius's fawning, he agrees to visit with his mother, Gertrude.
So now you're going to draw some conclusions. Why wouldn't Hamlet kill Claudius when he had the chance? All right, so think for a second. Now that he knows he's in danger, Claudius tries to pray. He won't give up his ill-gotten prizes, so he just kneels and recites formulas of prayer. Hamlet sees him alone and unguarded, but believes that to kill Claudius while he's praying would send him to heaven. Hamlet tiptoes on by 2, meet with his mother. Remember, Polonius is hiding behind the tapestry.
So a tapestry back in those days was kind of like a really fancy carpet that they would hang on the walls.
'Tis now the very witching time of night, when churchyards yawn and hell itself breathes out contagion to this world. Now could I drink hot blood and do such bitter business as the day would quake to look on. Soft now to my mother. Oh, my offense is rank. It smells to heaven.
It hath the primal eldest curse upon it. A brother's murder.
Now might I do it, Pat? Now he's a-praying, and now I'll do it. And so he goes to heaven, and so am I revenged. That would be scanned. A villain kills my father, and for that I, sole son, do this same villain send to heaven, when he is fit and seasoned for his passage. Why, this is hire and salary, not revenge.
Oh! Wretched state! Oh, bosom black as death!
No. When he is drunk, asleep, or in his rage, or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed, then trip him that his heels may kick at heaven, and that his soul may be as damned and black as hell whereto it goes.
Okay, so throughout Hamlet, Shakespeare uses the word mad. And a lot of part of our unit in 8th grade is nuance of words. So what does Shakespeare really mean when he says, has Ophelia gone mad? Has Hamlet gone mad? When Hamlet begins to get angry at his mom because she's angry at him, so we're kind of webbing a weave, for accusing her husband of murder, Polonius calls for help. Thinking the voice comes from Claudius, Hamlet stabs right through the tapestry and kills Polonius. So let me rewind a little bit. They are now in Hamlet's mom's bedroom, and Polonius was hiding behind the tapestry, kind of eavesdropping. Gertrude is horrified and is becoming convinced that her son is truly mad, and not mad angry, but mad crazy.
So Hamlet's murder of Polonius is discovered, and Hamlet is arrested. Hamlet is rude to Claudius, but Claudius won't react. He doesn't want to put Hamlet on trial, because remember, Hamlet knows too much. Instead, Claudius breaks his own land's laws by sending Hamlet away to England.
So what foreshadowing is Shakespeare giving us at this time of the narrative? Again, we see the word mad. Back at the castle, Ophelia has gone mad. The man she loves has rejected her privately and publicly and has also killed her father. She wanders about the castle, singing songs about dead men and faithless friends. Okay, so Laertes returns. Remember, he was in college. He was back at university. And he's also Ophelia's brother. I know you know that. He bursts into the castle at the head of a mob. He dismisses his followers and demands to know what happened to his father and why Hamlet has not been punished. So a lot of the time in middle school, and I know in high school, we talk about character development. So that's why we're going to take a good look at Ophelia right now. As King Claudius says, he's not responsible, and Ophelia comes back into the court. Laertes is horrified at what has happened to his beloved sister and vows vengeance, because when you look at Ophelia in the beginning of the narrative, she's beautiful, she's all kept together, she's, holding flowers and in love. Now at this point in the story, her character has declined. She is a mess, visually and mentally. So like Hamlet, he is now a young man. Laertes is now a young man with a mission. He wants revenge.
Now think about this for a second when we talk about static versus dynamic characters. All right, remember, a static character is one that stays the same throughout an entire storyline, where a dynamic character is one that changes.
Okay, so sailors have brought Horatio a letter. In it, he finds that Hamlet was captured by pirates when he led the attack on them. The letter is false, and Hamlet has outsmarted the king's plot to get rid of him and is now on his way back home to Denmark.
So the tragic death of Ophelia, was this foreshadowed?
Because remember, Hamlet told her that she needed to go to a nunnery.
Okay, so Laertes and King Claudius have received Hamlet's letter saying he's returning and vow to act quickly. Gertrude brings news of Ophelia's death, suicide by drowning. Gertrude is upset. Laertes is devastated, but Claudius is only annoyed at the inconvenience.
So we are starting to see King Claudius also, his development, as his plan is quickly unraveling. So Claudius is working on Laertes. He's trying to brainwash him. He's trying to get him on his side, turning Laertes' genuine vengeance into a tool of a corrupt king.
So think about misery loves company. Have you heard this before?
Laertes agrees to Claudius' scheme of a duel with trick swords and poisoned wine, and he suggests poisoning the tip of his sword as well. Claudius has corrupted him. He has pulled him over to his side. Okay, so before King Claudius is in cahoots, and we don't mean the game, with Laertes, a lot of things happened. For example, on his way home with Horatio, Hamlet plays with the idea of death, which is never far from his mind. What events so far have led up to his thinking? Why is he thinking about possible suicide? Hamlet and Horatio, on their way back to the castle, come upon a gravedigger. The gravedigger makes the conversation personal by handing Hamlet the skull of a childhood friend, Yorick, the jester. This is when a funeral approaches. So there's a lot of contrast here. Based on what you already know, whose funeral might this be? So Hamlet was smart. He had kind of a silly scene going on, which quickly turned into a personal scene and then even more of a tragic scene.
So think, is blood thicker than water? This is a proverb. Who loved her more? So now we're going back to argumentative thinking. Hamlet does not know Ophelia is dead, but as he spies on the funeral, the awful truth dawns on him. Laertes, Gertrude, and Claudius all mourn Ophelia in her shabby little funeral.
So we highlighted that because we want you to think, why, if she is so close with the king and queen, why was her funeral shabby and little?
So when Laertes, wild with grief, leaps into Ophelia's grave, Hamlet can stand being hidden no longer. He comes out and gets into an unfortunate fight with Laertes about who loved Ophelia most.
The king has, at this time, the king has bet 6 Arab horses against 6 French swords that Hamlet can beat Laertes in a duel. So we kind of fast forwarded here. We're back to where the king has pulled Laertes into getting rid of Hamlet. Hamlet accepts the duel, the challenge. Horatio is worried and fears another plot by Claudius. Hamlet says the key to life is to live as though every day would be your last, and that he is ready for what is to come.
So, before the duel begins, Claudius drops a pearl coated with poison into a goblet of wine as a toast to Hamlet. Hamlet apologizes to Laertes for his behavior, saying they're in similar circumstances. Laertes begins to have second thoughts.
Is Hamlet winning? So, Hamlet wins the first 2 touches of the sword. Gertrude is beyond pleased at his performance and apparent sanity. So remember, she was worried about him, that he was ill, he's suicidal, he's depressed. So she's happy to see him back to himself. She takes the poisoned cup, obviously not knowing that it's been poisoned by her husband, and drinks a toast to Hamlet. Claudius, her husband, doesn't even stop her, even though he knows that she's drinking the poison. Because then he would have to explain to the whole world why he poisoned the cup.
Hamlet, this pearl is thine. Here's to thy health.
I'll play this bout first. Send it by a while.
Another hit! What say you?
I do confess it.
Our son shall win.
Be scant of breath. The queen carouses to thy fortune, Hamlet.
Gertrude! Do not drink.
I will, my lord. I pray you pardon me.
I dare not drink yet, madam. By and by.
Come, let me wipe thy face.
Is this the climax or the twist of the story? Laertes is shocked that the king would let Gertrude, whom he loves so much, drink the poisoned wine. He continues the duel. He wounds Hamlet with his poisoned sword, but in the fray, the swords are exchanged, and he is also wounded with it. So now we have 3 poisoned people. Suddenly, Gertrude cries out that the wine was poisoned. Claudius tries to deny it, but Laertes Seeing him for what he really is tells the whole plot. Poisoned wine, poisoned swords, and all.
So Hamlet turns on Claudius, forces the last of the poisoned wine down his throat, and stabs him with a venomed sword for good measure. Realizing he's dying, Hamlet forgives Laertes, who, because he has been stabbed closer to the heart, he dies first. He gives the kingdom to
Fortinbras.
Then he dies in Horatio's arms.
Okay, so back to our debate from last week. Should Shakespeare be dumbed down in schools? So would you rather analyze how we have done in our last 2 lessons, or read a 3-panel rendition of Hamlet?
Look at the difference. This 3-panel is very simple compared to everything you've seen and the intensity of what you've learned.
Okay, so we talked to an area high school principal and their literature department, and this was one side of the debate. So remember, there's always 2 sides, so go ahead and read that.
So as long as they can teach the basics effectively, they should be able to taste Shakespeare. But they need to be aware that high school students are increasingly presented with options for college and credit classes, even at the sophomore level now. They need to plan accordingly so their students have the basic writing skills to function in these newer course offerings. I taught a Shakespeare class for over 30 years. I do not think it's a good idea to have 7th and 8th grade students read Shakespeare. Though it is considered modern English, there are so many colloquial words and historical references that a young reader becomes confused and frustrated. As a result, the youth will resolve to Cliff Notes or other summaries. There is a language challenge even for seniors in high school. We want students to read and enjoy a whole book or play.
Okay, in addition, you can also see this as a counterclaim. It depends on the way you're looking at it. He also said that the second major point is that Shakespeare has many adult themes that are important to understanding the play and the characters. Those themes are tied to the true understanding of the play. So we also interviewed or spoke with 2 of our soon-to-be CMSD freshmen, Darwin and Alexis, and when asked if they appreciated analyzing pieces of Shakespeare, this is what they had to say. It is important for us to learn Shakespeare because it shows that it is best to get revenge right away when they're expecting it, but that it is better to wait. So we enjoyed Hamlet because it really did teach us important lessons. The quote that we remember most from a novel we read, The Graveyard Book, was, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." We compared this quote when we analyzed Hamlet and the revenge that he wanted.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at a really amazing piece that was just put together for CMSD. All right, the piece features a very special performance by 50 former actor teachers from the school residency program. Very special indeed. This is a beautiful contribution to our collaboration with interpreting and analyzing Hamlet. David Hansen and the Great Lake Theater Company never disappoints. And we love working with all of our Cleveland scholars every year, whether it's in our classrooms or at the theater. Thank you, Mr. Hansen and company.
Hic incipit pestis. That's Latin for "here begins plague." It was a phrase found in the baptismal records at Stratford-upon-Avon, weeks after the birth of William Shakespeare. Pandemic is not a word Shakespeare would have been familiar with, but he was no stranger to the concept of plague. You may have read online that while in quarantine, Shakespeare was able to pen some of his greatest works, King Lear, Measure for Measure, and Venus and Adonis. But if your teacher planned on bringing Great Lakes Theater's residency program to your school, we can't come. Theaters and schools are closed, but we'd like to connect with you. We'd like to take this time to chat with you about the play that you've studied and introduce you to some of our teaching artists.
By now you've read the play and are familiar with the characters. Hamlet has returned home to Denmark for his father's funeral, which is quickly followed by his mother's wedding to his uncle. The ghost of Hamlet's father appears to him, demanding revenge for his murder. Now, at one point, when Hamlet is all alone, he contemplates exactly how much oppression one person can endure before taking action. Now, we've brought together 50 Great Lakes theater actor teachers spanning the entire 40-year history of the program to perform this most iconic of Shakespearean soliloquies.
To be. Or not to be.
That is the question.
Whether 'tis nobler in the mind.
To suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
Or to take arms.
Against a sea of troubles.
And by opposing,
end them.
To die, to sleep, no more.
And by a sleep, to say we end.
The heartache.
And to the 1,000 natural shocks.
That flesh is heir to.
'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished.
To die. To sleep.
To sleep. Perchance to dream.
Aye. There's the rub.
For in that sleep of death,
what dreams may come.
When we have shuffled off this mortal coil.
Must give us pause.
There's the respect.
That makes calamity of so long life.
For who would bear the whips and scorns of time?
The oppressor's wrong.
The proud man's contumely.
The pangs of despised love.
The law's delay.
The insolence of office.
And the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes. When he himself might his quietus make.
With a bare bodkin.
Who would fardels bear?
To grunt and sweat.
Under a weary life.
But that the dread of something after death.
The undiscovered country.
From whose bourne no traveler returns.
Puzzles the will.
And makes us rather bear those ills we have.
Then fly to others that we know not of.
Thus conscience does make cowards of us all.
And thus the native hue of resolution
is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought.
And enterprise of great pitch and moment.
With this regard.
Their currents turn awry.
And lose the name.
Of action.
So Hamlet is trapped between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, he has his father, the ghost of his father, urging him to kill Claudius. On the other, regicide comes with the penalty of death. Okay, so imagine that you are Hamlet's friend, and he has just told you that he has contemplated being or not being, and exactly what has brought him to this place. What advice would you give him? How would you advise him? Who else can he turn to at this point in time? Okay, now, grab a pen and some paper and take 3 minutes and write down anything that comes to your mind in the form of a letter to the Prince of Denmark. Oh, and don't forget to pause the video.
Good morning. This is a lesson on probability. It is one of the Common Core standards, which will focus on investigating chance processes and develop, use, and evaluate probability models. My name is Teresa Bender, and I am from Paul L. Dunbar Arts Enrichment Academy, and I am looking forward to teaching you about probability. Part 1, describe probability with words. Part 1 covers 7SP5, I can statements. I can explain the numeric probability of an event must be between 0 and 1, and I can explain the likeliness of an event occurring based on the probability. Have you ever heard someone say, it's an unlikely chance that I'm going to win in bingo, or it's going to be 35% chance of rain today, or each team has a 50-50 chance of winning? What they're referring to is probability, the chance that something will happen. how likely it is that some event will occur. So let's see what probability is all about in math. Let's take a look at the picture to the far right. What is the probability of getting a green balloon in this picture? Absolutely, there is no way you can get a green balloon. It is impossible. The only color you could get is a red balloon. So to get a green balloon, we say that it is impossible to get. There is zero chance of occurring. Anything that has zero chance, we call that impossible. The probability of an event that falls between 0% and 50%, so anywhere in between, so 1%, 2%, all the way up to 49%, anything in between 0 and 50%, we call that unlikely to occur. Let's take a look at the example in the picture below. What is the probability of getting a cat in this picture? Well, there's one cat out of 5 animals. 1 out of 5 is a 20%. A 20% falls between 0% and 50%, so we would say that is unlikely to occur. The probability of an event that is exactly 50%, we call that an equal chance. It has to be exactly 50%. So let's take a look at flipping a coin. One side is heads, one side is tails. What is the probability of getting heads in this picture? Well, you have 1 out of 2, which is exactly 50%. 50% is an equal chance of occurring, or we call it equally likely to occur. The probability of an event that falls between 50% and 100%, so we're talking 51%, 52%, and so on, all the way up to 99%, we would say that is a likely chance of occurring. So the same picture with the dogs and the cat, but this time, what is the probability of getting a dog? Well, there's 4 dogs out of 5 animals altogether. 4 over 5 is exactly 80%. So you have an 80% chance of getting a dog. So that is a likely chance because 80% falls between 50 and 100%. The probability of an event that is exactly 100%, or on a scale of 0 to 1, on the one end of the scale, we say that is certain. So for example, when we look at those birds, what is the probability of getting a bird in the picture? Well, if there's only birds, there is a 100% chance that you're going to get a bird. Or we could look at it as a fraction. There are 5 birds out of a total of 5 animals. 5 divided by 5 is equal to 1. So whether we're doing percent, which is 100%, or we're on our scale from 0 to 1, 100% is equal to 1. So we would refer to it as certain. Now let's get some practice on this topic. What is the likelihood of the event occurring? So using the probability scale, impossible, unlikely, even chance, likely, or certain, I want you to read the following questions and select the word that best describes the situation. I'm going to give you about 5 seconds. If you need more time, make sure you pause this video. Okay, so let's look at the problems. Picking a letter that is not a vowel in the alphabet. Well, the vowels in the alphabet are A, E, I, O, and U. There are 5 letters, but we have 26 letters in the alphabet, so it's more likely that you're going to pick a letter that is not a vowel. So we would say that is likely. Picking a vowel in the alphabet, if there's only 5 letters out of 26, 5 is less than 13, because 13 would be half of 26, so it's an unlikely possibility. Picking the letter E in the word football. Well, do you see any E's in the word football? No. So that would be impossible. Picking an L in the word fall. Well, if there's 4 letters and 2 out of the 4 are L's, then we would say it is a even chance. You have 5 red balloons. What is the probability of picking a red balloon? If there's only red balloons, it will be certain that you will pick a red balloon. You did a great job. Let's continue on. Let's take a moment to make sure you understand everything that you should have learned from this first topic 1. Topic 1 covered the probability scale, that an event can be expressed as a number between 0 and 1. 0 representing the impossible event, and 1 representing a certain or a 100% chance that it will occur. And everything else in between is a fraction that falls between 0 and 1. We also covered vocabulary words that help us express the likeliness of an event to occur. For example, 0 was impossible. Anything that fell between 0 and 50% was expressed as unlikely. Anything that was a 50% chance of occurring was an even chance. Anything between 50 and 100% was described as likely. And anything that was 100% certain that it would occur is represented as the word certain. I hope you enjoyed that part 1, and let's take a look at this quick little video just to refresh everything that we've covered in part 1. Part 2, theoretical probability. The standard is 7SP6, which is statistics and probability. There are 2 I can statements that this lesson will cover. The first, I can determine the probability for a single event by collecting and analyzing frequency in a chance process. And number 2, I can explain the difference between experimental and theoretical probability. Okay, this slide is going to talk about how we can show what the outcomes are using math and subsets. So when we're flipping a coin, what 2 options do you have when you flip a coin? You can either get heads or you can get tails. So you would put it in subset, heads and tails. Now, what are your outcomes in rolling the dice? So you put in your brackets, your subset, your numbers that you could get are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now let's take a look at the spinner. What are the outcomes of this spinner? Set up your subsets, and you should have included A, B, and C. The last problem, I'm going to give you a second. Try it on your own. Make sure you set up the subsets. And in that subset, you should have included 3, 4, and 5. Even though 4 repeated, you do not write it twice. Just like A in the previous problem is larger, you do not make A twice. You just write what you see without any repeating. Theoretical probability is the ratio of the number of favorable or desired outcomes, meaning what are you looking for, over the total number of possible outcomes. What is the total number of options you have in the situation? So if we take an example here at our spinner below, we see that there are 8 sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the spinner is also broken up into a white section and a black section. So we're going to take an example right now. If I wanted to find the theoretical probability of drawing a black section, you would write TP, which stands for theoretical probability. You would have in parentheses the word black because that's the favorable or desired outcome that I am looking for. Well, let's go and count the favorable or desired outcomes. How many black sections do you see? I see 1, 2, 3, 4. So I would write on my ratio 4 over my total, which is 8. 4 over 8 can be simplified as 1/2 or 50%. We would describe this likeliness as a even chance or equally likely chance. I could ask you another question. I could ask you, what is the theoretical probability of drawing a number greater than 3? How would I write that? I would write TP, parentheses, a number greater than 3, and a parentheses is equal to. Well, let's think. How many numbers are greater than 3 on the spinner? That's correct. You have 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all greater than 3. How would I write the ratio there? I would write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because 5 numbers are greater than 3 all over the total number of outcomes, which is 8 on the spinner. 5 over 8 is equal to approximately 62%, which is a likely chance of occurring. All right, let's take a look at this problem here. A shape will be randomly drawn from the box shown below. Decide where each event will be located on the probability scale. Then place the letter for each event on the appropriate place on the probability scale. So A, the circle is drawn. So the theoretical probability of getting a circle would be TP parentheses circle is equal to, well, how many circles do you see there? 0. So you would write 0 out of our total, which is how many shapes do you see? 9. So it would be 0 over 9, which is equal to 0%. And we describe that as impossible. Where will A be on the number line below? If you said over 0, you would be correct. Moving on to B, a square is drawn. The theoretical probabilities of a square is TP parentheses square. How many squares do you see? 4 out of 9, which is equal to 45%, which is, where does 45% fall? Between 0 and it's less than 50, so we would say that is unlikely to occur. But it would be closer to the 50, correct? So on our scale below, it would be close to the 1/2, before the 1/2, but not on the 1/2. Excellent job. Now, a star is drawn. Well, the theoretical probability of a star will be TP parentheses star is equal to, how many stars do you see? 1 out of our total, 9. So our ratio is 1/9, which can be simplified to 11%. Now 11%, where does that fall on our probability scale? It is not impossible and it's not certain. It's between impossible and equal chance, but it's closer to the impossible side because 11% is closer to 0 than it is closer to 50%. Kind of understand that? Great. D, a shape that is not a square in this box. Well, what's not a square? A triangle, a star. Very good. And how many are those? 5. 5 out of the total of 9. So our ratio is 5 over 9, which is equal to 55%. Well, 55% is greater than 50, but less than 100. So it would be right after the 50%. So it would be in the unlikely section. Excellent job. Okay, let's move on to our next problem. You have 4 blue marbles, 3 red marbles, 2 green marbles, and 3 yellow marbles in the bag. You randomly choose 1 marble. What are the possible outcomes in the bag? What colors could I possibly draw from this bag? You would set up your subset and you should have included blue, red, green, and yellow. Remember, you only write them one time, even though they may repeat of marbles, you just write them once. Moving on to number 2. What is the probability of choosing a blue marble? Well, remember, probability is the ratio of the desired outcome, so how many blue, over our total number of options. So, looking up at our information, what is our theoretical probability of getting a blue? You would say we have 4 blue marbles over our total, which is 12. How did I get 12 again? I added 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 3 to get 12. Now 4 over 12 can simplify to 1 over 3, which is about 33%, or we would call that an unlikely chance of occurring. Now let's move on to number 3. Use the space below to describe the likelihood of not choosing a blue. Then explain your reasoning. So we have to talk about likelihood. Remember our probability scale, our likelihood was, is it impossible, unlikely, even chance, likely, or certain? Okay, so that's the first thing we got to make sure we explain. The second thing we need to talk about is not choosing a blue. Well, what are not blue? Well, not blue up there are our red, our green, and our yellow. When we add our red and our green and a yellow, we get a total of 8. You could have taken the total minus the 4 and still got 8, because remember, there's many ways to solve a problem. So let's write our theoretical probability of not getting a blue. You would write TP, parentheses, not blue, is equal to, remember probability is our desired over our total. So our desired here is 8 over our total, which is 12, which can be simplified to 2 over 3, which is a 67% chance of occurring. Now, where would that fall on our likelihood scale? Well, 67% is greater than 50%, but less than certain. So we would call that likely to occur, because it falls between 50% and 100%. Way to go.